Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 11 of this course. In this chapter, we're going to talk about our backend setup, which is with Firebase. And as I've said it before, I kind of assume that you've gone through the chapters of this course chronologically. So you started from the absolute beginning, introduction, and then you're following along. So there's lots and lots of information. As you can see, it's about 8 hours of information before this chapter. So I feel like since I've explained everything so thoroughly in all those chapters, I'm not going to go through all that again. So I will jump over stuff that I've already explained. So if you haven't watched those chapters, I really suggest that you at least skim over them a little bit so you get the gist of it. Now I'm looking at my notes and I can see that in this chapter, as the caption shows here, we're going to set up our backend. Our backend is using Firebase, and while developing this course, I contemplated creating as a part of this course, have a custom backend as well that we do with Django. I personally do Django development for backend and websites, so like REST APIs, and also for simple websites as well. But to be honest with you, if I then go and create a simple backend with Django and then show you how to integrate with that using Flutter, it really has nothing to do with Flutter. Like the backend part has nothing to do with Flutter itself. So having that issue in the beginning of this course, I was faced with a challenge of, do I go into the rabbit hole of creating a custom backend for this course and walk you through also creating a custom backend, which has nothing to do with Flutter? And Flutter is the reason you're watching this course. So I was faced with that challenge of whether I should do that or just use Firebase. And I chose Firebase simply because it is a product by Google. It is kind of like serverless. So it is a server without you actually having to write code as such. So I picked Firebase for its simplicity so that we can get the backend working up and running without so much work. And I hope that you understand that that is the reason that we're not doing a custom backend. But Firebase is a very reliable backend created by Google, and it has all Google's financial backing for further developments and for support. So you don't have to worry if you're picking Firebase and if you're thinking, oh, is it going to continue being supported? The quick answer is yes, it is going to be supported. It is so big, everyone's using it, and it's too big even to fail, I would say, right now, at least for the upcoming next few years, I would say. I can't predict the future for 10, 20 years in the future, but for now, you don't have to worry about that. So that's what we are going to do in this chapter. I'm just going to take it in my notes. Now, previously, when Flutter came out, like year 2020, or even the beginning of 2021, if you want to integrate with Firebase, you had to do a lot of custom work. Now, in the recent versions of Flutter, there is a command that you can issue from your terminal. It is called FlutterFire CLI. And this command is amazing because, like, the work that you had to previously do manually, a lot of custom work, dragging files and plists and JSONs, configurations, app IDs, etc. It was such a big undertaking that a lot of developers would make a lot of mistakes during that process, and it was just not good. So there is now a command that you can issue from your terminal, which allows you to do all that custom work, but it does it for you, so you don't have to do that manually. So as I provided here, there is a link. I'm going to open that link if I can somewhere. Let's see if I can bring up Safari. It opens in a wrong screen. I'll bring that screen here so you'll see it as well. Enlarge that screen and also enlarge the font so it is more visible. So you can see it says FlutterFire Overview, and it says Get to Know Firebase for Flutter. We recommend starting with the Get to Know Firebase for Flutter Code Lab and video. Okay, so there's a video here if you want to watch it. And it says, okay, if you're migrating your existing project, then look at the migration guide. Migrating, if you're not familiar with that term, if you're not coming from a software engineer background, migrating kind of means that you have an existing thing and you want to make it newer. Like put in new stuff in it. So you kind of migrate your information from the old project to the new one. So, but in this case, we don't have to worry about that because we've created a brand new project. So there's no existing Firebase installation in our application that we have to worry about. Okay. There's a lot of information here. You can see it says using the CLI, etc., etc. And that is actually what we're going to do now. We are going to have a look at how we can install the FlutterFire CLI. And you can see here it says you should execute the Dart pub global activate FlutterFire CLI, and then you issue FlutterFire config. So let's start by copying this code from here. Copy it, and I'm going to bring up my terminal, and I'm going to increase the size of my terminal so you actually see what is happening here. Okay. So I'm going to paste that command in, and I'm going to let it do its thing. I've already done this installation before, so for me, it may actually go a little bit smoother or a little bit faster, but for you, it may take a little bit longer, depending on whether you've already installed FlutterFire CLI before or not. So now that that is installed, the next thing you will have to do is you will actually need to make sure, I mean, it is not provided in the documentation, but it's something that I'm providing for you because I know that I've personally run into this issue before. So this FlutterFire CLI, it will give you this command, as you can see here, FlutterFire, okay? And if I, in my terminal, say which FlutterFire, you can see that FlutterFire is installed in this folder. So it's under my personal folder on my computer /.popcache/bin, and then right there. So unfortunately, when you install FlutterFire CLI, it doesn't tell your terminal where it is installed. So if you then immediately after that say FlutterFire and then blah, 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 as it is mentioned here, FlutterFire configure, your terminal will most probably say that, what is FlutterFire? So it's not provided here in the documentation, but I'm telling you here, as you can see in the caption, that you need to tell your terminal where FlutterFire is actually installed, okay? So then what you'll need to do is as I've mentioned here, you can see I've said that you need to change your path and include your home folder /popcache/bin. So if I go to my terminal configuration, if I say vim zshrc, you can see at the top here somewhere, I should have there, you see, it says export path. And I say, okay, my new path is the old path plus, using this double colon here, or colon, this folder, as I've mentioned here in the captions at the bottom of the screen. So you will need to do this as well. So I'm going to quit Vim now. And then after you've done that, make sure that you source that configuration. So in my case, I would have to say source zshrc, and that will read the paths fresh. Otherwise, you could also take the high road and like close your terminal, completely terminate it, and then start it again, which in turn reads the configuration and brings FlutterFire path into existence. If you don't want to source, that's what I mean. So now we've talked about that. Now let's actually talk about what the Firebase CLI is. It is a, actually, let me make sure I tick all of these items that I talked about in right now. Let me just mark them as done in my notes. So so what you need to do now is what we need to do now is to talk about Firebase CLI. And as you can see here, is a CLI to help us interact with Firebase right from our terminal. Now this used to be done manually previously, in that you would have to go to Firebase and like create a whole separate project and then integrate that project into your Flutter application. So you don't have to do any of that anymore. So what you need to do now is, as the next step, is to install the Firebase CLI, which does all of that work for you. So I've provided here, as you can see, there is a command here that you can issue. And then you can go to a Firebase Google.com docs CLI install CLI Mac blah blah. So I'm actually going to go to that location in my web browser here, so you can see what I'm doing here. And you will see there's a lot of information provided here. I'm going to bring up I'm going to make the size a little bit bigger. I'm going to bring my face maybe to the bottom right as well, so you can see more information on the screen. And you can see for Mac or Linux, then there is, yeah, let's go here. Mac, you can install the Firebase CLI for Mac or Linux using one of the following options. So standalone binary, blah, blah. So you need to have a look at this documentation on how you can install the Firebase CLI on your computer, whether you're using Mac or whether you're using Linux or Windows. Um, so after you've done that, after you've installed the Firebase CLI, you will actually need to log into your account using that Firebase CLI. So let's do that. Let me actually in here. Let's bring up our project in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to bring it up here and bring up the right caption as well, so you see what we're talking about. We're going to talk about Firebase login and logout. You see, when you want to integrate your Flutter application with Firebase, you need to create a Firebase project on something called the Firebase console. So this project is pretty much the configuration of your Firebase backend on Firebase's console on their website. So you need to configure a backend. So what we need to do here is now, before we can actually configure a backend, in your terminal, you need to tell Firebase what user you have, because I personally have many Google accounts, and any one of those Google accounts can potentially have many many Firebase projects, because Firebase projects are linked to your Google accounts. Okay. Now, in order for our Firebase CLI to understand where it needs to create the project, you need to tell it to log in with an account. All right. So the way to do that is to bring up terminal. And as you can see, here is my terminal. And I'm going to clean this a little bit. I'm going to bring up the font as well, so it's quite ginormous, and that's okay. So what you need to do now is to tell it to log in. So I'm going to say Firebase log in. Okay. It's going to do its work, and it's telling me I'm already logged in with this account. If you haven't logged in with an account, then you're going to get a prompt telling you, okay, which email and password do you want to log in with? So now, it may be actually worth it, to be honest with you, for me to log out right now so that you see the entire process. So I'm a bit hesitant to log out because I actually have protected my Google account with a security key. So I don't have the key right here, and I hope that I can find it. So for the sake of actually going through this process together with you, so you see how it works, I'm gonna log out. So let's log out here. So I'm saying Firebase logout, and it says there is a new version of a Firebase tool. So let's copy this here, and I'm gonna see if we can install. What did it say? npm install global. So let's copy that here. Global Firebase tools. Okay. Let's see if it can do its work then before we can continue. And npm is something called a node package manager, and it is kind of like if you're working with Node.js, if you're developing, for instance, Node applications, which you don't have to know about. It's just a way. It's like a toolkit for creating applications. Remove the existing file and try again, or npm with force. Okay, npm install global with -- force, I think. Yeah. So it's like a dependency management for Node applications, and Firebase tools is a Node application. So that's all you need to know, really. I mean, there's there are courses available about Node and Node.js that you can actually have a look at how they work, etc. So I'm not going to go into details about that. So before I could have actually done a Firebase logout without all of this, but I just want to show you that things aren't planned. Like, I can't perfectly plan things here. And when I tried to log out, it said, oh, there's a new version of Node available, blah, blah. So now that there's a new version of Firebase tools available that you can install with npm. So I did that. So let's now say Firebase logout. Okay, so the logout actually was successful previously. So let's now say Firebase login. And it says allow Firebase to collect CLI usage and error reporting information. I'm gonna say, as a developer, to be honest with you, you may be tended to say no, like here, but if you are a developer, you can put yourself in the shoes of another developer working at Google, working for Firebase, and they are trying to get some information about how you use the CLI and whether they can learn from your usage of the CLI in order to make the CLI better. So I usually say yes to these things, especially if there's a developer asking for permission. So, but you can say no to this if you want to. So I'm just going to say yes. And you can see here, then there's a screen provided here asking me to log in with one of my Google accounts. All right. And I'm going to pick my company's Google account because that's what I usually use. All right. So I'm going to choose that. And it says Firebase CLI wants to access your Google account. And it says, okay, what permissions it's going to use. You can have a look at this information if you want to, if it concerns you. So if you're concerned about any of these things, please go and read the links provided here. I'm just going to say allow. And once that is done, you will see that it says Firebase CLI login successful. And then you can pretty much just close this window safely. And now it says logged in as pixelityab@gmail.com. So I can say Firebase login again, and then that will be the prompt that you saw in the beginning of this video, that you are logged in. All right. Good. That was a lot of information. Now that you are logged in with the Firebase CLI, you actually need to configure a Firebase project. All right. And we do that with the FlutterFire CLI, which we installed in the beginning of this chapter using this command, dart pop global activate. All right. So what you need to do now is to issue the FlutterFire configure command, as I've shown here down on the left-hand side. So I'm going to do that, FlutterFire configure. So it will fetch all the projects that I've already created in my Google account, and it says, okay, these are the projects available: Flash Chat, Flutter Node Guessing, Chords, Random Project Testing, or you can create a new project. Now I'm going to choose create a new project here, okay? And it says, okay, enter a project ID for your new Firebase project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type my notes. All right. So as you can see, my notes is the name of our Flutter project as well. So my notes. Now I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to create the same project called my notes. Okay. I'm going to press enter here. And it says, yeah, I'm going to create it. And it's probably, I mean, you can see that we immediately got an error saying that this project already exists. And you can see command blah, blah, blah. Yeah, failed to create a project because there's already a project with ID my notes. Please try again with a unique project ID. So this is basically telling us that, hey, someone else has created my notes. And it wasn't one of the projects that we had created, because if you have a look at if you open your web browser and say Firebase console and go to your Firebase console and let me make sure that I'm logged in with my Pixelity account. Yes. And if I have a look, let's see, dismiss, let's see, get started, Firebase helps you, watch demo. Yeah, we are logged in with that account. So I can actually see maybe I don't have any projects set up here, which is a little bit weird because we actually saw that there were some projects set up under this account. So I don't understand why the Firebase console is not showing them. Firebase console, backed by Google, Firebase console Google. Yeah, there they are. Okay, so it is on console.firebase.google, okay? And I can see the My Notes application is not an application that I own. I haven't created that. So what it is saying is that globally, Firebase projects have an identifier. And now I've entered an identifier that is already taken. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to issue the same command, FlutterFire configure. And this time I'm going to give it a little bit more information about the project name so that it makes it a little bit more unique. So I'm going to choose create a new project. And then in here, in the name of the project, I'm going to say my notes, Flutter project. Maybe someone has already taken this as well. I don't know. So it's doing its thing. It's doing its magic, basically. So let's have a look. And I mean, to be honest with you, this is okay that it's taking some time. It is doing a lot of work. It's setting up like the iOS project and Android project, etc. So this thing used to take a lot of time to do by hand, like maybe tenfold the amount of time that this CLI is taking. So I'm not so bothered by the fact that it's taking some time. So, and here it will actually tell you, okay, which platforms do you want to select? And as I said, like Flutter allows you to create web applications, Android applications, iOS applications, and also uh, desktop applications, so 4 platforms. And in here it says, okay, which ones do you want to create? For our project right now, you can just say Android and iOS. You don't have to worry about like um, Mac OS or Linux or Windows and web, but you have the ability to do that if you want to. So choose Android and iOS for now and press enter. So it's going to do its work. So let it do its magic. And now this is the amazing part that you had to do manually before. You had to previously go and register like your application with Apple, and then go and register bundle identifier, and then put that bundle identifier manually in Firebase, and then download some files, put those files in your iOS and Android project. Now you don't have to do that anymore. Here it just tells you which bundle identifier are you using for your project. And if you remember from before, when we created our Flutter project from the beginning, we said Flutter create and then an organization, which for me was se.pixology. Do you remember that command? It kind of looked like, I mean, if I bring up terminal, maybe I can even go back to it. Flutter create. Do you remember this command? I will zoom into it a little bit so you can see better. This is how we actually created our project. We said Flutter create org se pixology my notes. So the bundle identifier for this application will be sepixology.mynotes. However, since sepixology is the reverse domain name for me, this won't be the case for you. So go back to how you created that identifier for a project using your organization name, and now you have to paste that in here. So you will see, I'm going to say se pixology my notes. Okay, so enter that, and it's going to configure your iOS project for you. And that was it. So it has now set up everything necessary for your project to work. So I mean, you may just think, oh well, this was so little, and what did it actually do? But for me, who's been working with Firebase and Flutter for a very long time, this is all magical because it did a lot of work. It configured your application on the Firebase console. It actually registered an Android and an iOS project hooked into this Firebase project, downloaded the configuration files, placed them in the exact correct place in your application. So it did a lot of work, but you don't really have to know about that. So now, if you want to kind of see the result of it, if you see here, the output of this says that there's an identifier associated with your iOS app, and then there's an identifier associated with your Android app. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's now make sure that these identifiers are correct and that the bundle identifier that we provided to the CLI is also placed in the configuration file correctly. So copy this, for instance, iOS identifier that was created for you. So copy it and then search for it in your entire project. And then you'll find a little file here. Let me bring it down. It is called Firebase options.dart. So this is where iOS is configured. And let me bring this like that so you don't see it. And this is where the Android project is configured. You can see the app ID is right here, and the API key is right there. So don't worry about this. I mean, you should not show your API key and app ID to anybody. But since I'm developing this course for you, I have to show it. I can't just go and censor it. But don't worry about it. By the time you're seeing this video, by the time you're seeing this course, I've already deleted this project from Firebase. So there's not going to be any security risk involved. So that project isn't going to exist even if you know the API key and app ID. So don't worry about that. But if you are developing your own application, just kind of be careful who you share your API key and app ID with. All right. That was a lot of information, a lot. So, and I'm going to actually tick here that we've talked about that, and create a new project. And yeah, that's all working as it should. So I'm also going to go here in the captions, and I can see that I have some information here about enabling multi-dex, and multi-dex was something that we've already enabled in the previous chapter, which was chapter 10 for the Android project. So now everything should be working as it did before, to be honest with you. So if you, in your Visual Studio Code or Android Studio, if you're developing your Flutter app with Android Studio, you can also go and select your device to run on. Now, in the previous chapter, you saw that for the entirety of this in this course, I'm going to use an Android phone to develop our application. So you may choose to use an iOS simulator, an Android emulator, or an Android phone or tablet, or iOS phone or tablet. So, but I'm going to use a real Android phone. And as you saw, we have the ability to bring up SCR CPY to mirror the Android screen. So I'm going to bring it right here. Change the size of Visual Studio Code's window a little bit so you can see the Android telephone right there as well. Then what I'm going to do, just to make sure that the project runs after all of this work that we've done, so that we haven't broken anything really, let's then go and debug the application. Sorry, run it without debugging. And this is what you will see. This is the result of all the work that we've done. Pretty much nothing. This is like, I mean, it sounds funny to say it because we did a lot of work with the Firebase project, but there is nothing that you can see on the screen. And that's the reality of doing software development. You may be putting a lot of work sometimes in doing something, and this result isn't immediately visible. All right. So, but what you have done in this chapter was that you actually set up your backend with just a few commands. You installed two CLIs, the FlutterFire CLI and the Firebase CLI. You logged in with Firebase CLI, and then you set up your backend with the FlutterFire CLI. All right. Now, just to make sure everything is set up properly, also, you can bring up your web browser. I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to say console.firebase. And let me make sure that we have our notes app here. You can see my notes Flutter project, and you can click on it and you can see how it is set up for you. You can see there's an Android app set up and an iOS app set up. So you didn't have to really do anything. Now there's lots of things you can do with Firebase, which we're going to actually play with throughout this course, but not right now. Just make sure that your Firebase project is created for you by logging into console.firebase.google.com. Many dots. All right, and we've talked about this now, running the application on an Android telephone. So that was already set up, so we don't have to talk about that now. Now that you've seen that, you've set up your backend, you're ready to go, and so I can say congratulations. So that's in order. Now, the Android setup is already done, so I can see that is set up. We don't have to talk about that either. However, what we do need to talk about is what we're going to discuss in the next chapter. So in the next chapter, we are, for the first time in this course, we are going to talk about the Flutter code, actual Flutter code. We're going to start writing a simple registration screen. So using this registration screen, our right now hypothetical users are going to look at the screen and say, okay, I don't have an account with this application. I'm going to register myself. So then you will they will be able to enter their email address, a password of their choosing, press some sort of a button, and we will then talk with Firebase and say, here's a new user, register that person. Okay. So that's all for the next chapter, which is chapter 12. So grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever you want to do. get refreshed then, and I'll see you in the next chapter.